listening to a Frozen Truth production.
Hey everybody, it's Tuesdays with Morris, and we're in second season and our second episode, and we're galvanizing this new summer with deeper conversations, a little bit more ways that we're crossing bridges and going through what we understand life to be, but we haven't lived all the life besides between the two of us. There's plenty more to experience.
If you want to do the mystic numbers thing, this is episode 12.
And we can go to hex numbers, but I'm not going there.
Oh,
sorry. Like I said, I have definitely been
well, you
binge
surprised
watching
me with that one.
I've been binge watching a lot of Big Bang Theory.
Oh, there we go.
That's a good summer series. So, if I were to break the ice, have you? Because we're catching up on some things that I've challenged Morris on in season 1. He's watched Back to the Future 3. Are there any other things you may have caught up on since we last talked? Other movies that we may have said, and that's fine.
I watched for the first time an episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, animated version of Star Trek that is really quite funny.
That sounds hilarious. Just a whole bunch of red shirts saying, "Who's next?"
Basically, sort of. It's all the people who work in the lower decks, and one of them is a real rascal, charming rascal, and she has no interest in being an officer. And there's another guy who's a super nerd who really wants to be an officer.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this other woman who came in who's a very tech savvy person who's just, oh wow, look where I am, and it's quite good. The animation style is similar to like Powerpuff Girls or Johnny Bravo or those kind of cartoons. I watched one episode and I enjoyed it very much.
This is what I like more is he's going to quote my cartoons from 2000s and 90s of Johnny Bravo and Powerpuff Girls. That's awesome. That's awesome.
I just like animation. I think animation is a far more interesting medium than live action film. And a lot of people will disagree with me vehemently on that. I mean, particularly generational. I noticed, I probably have shared this before when I shared Beauty and the Beast, which was Oscar nominated for Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, I think the animated version is superior to the live action version.
It is.
Particularly the villain is better.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't mean that the live action version is bad. It's not. I enjoyed it. But I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the animated version.
The animated version literally invented animation techniques involving CGI integration on like camera crane shots and expressions that have not been utilized yet. It was almost the beginning of the sweet spot of hand-drawn animation and full integration with CGI, because you also see like this version of animated films such as Atlantis, Titan AE is another one.
I've seen Titan AE. I haven't seen Atlantis.
It's another kind of in the vault Disney film, and you see this use of more traditional animation styles, but then they have CGI wide shots and moving panning shots that are really showing that we can really dive into this world the way we want it without spending so much time. And I think, if I'm going with you, I think animation has always been the push of the evolution of storytelling. Mm-hmm. Even just going back into like old Disney Imagineers and what they had to do to show a moving picture, to show a motion picture in animation. It's so much more illusion-based, almost like just literally magic. Like the way we perceive magic is essentially a set of illusions. And what they had to do to not show the assistant hiding in the box regarding framing and zooming and even that with simply Mickey Mouse and Goofy. And so the fact that they're always reinventing technology to tell a story in a way that real life just could not capture. This is why I appreciate and thank goodness for a director like James Cameron, who says, I wrote Avatar in like the 80s. But I waited until the technology could finally catch up to what I wanted to portray through animation. He did not want to shoot it in the 80s. He didn't want people to wear just simple makeup and prosthetics. He needed an animating engine that can keep up with his imagination.
You didn't want it to look like Planet of the Apes. Which, the first movie was pretty good, but the costumes were great for the time, but some of the stuff just doesn't wear that well. It's kind of like Doctor Who, the science fiction show that was great for the writing is incredible on Doctor Who, but the cheesy low budget BBC special effects from the 60s is like, okay, I like this story. I like these actors, so I'm going to keep watching this. But man,
right?
Yeah. Once again, that's a situation where even hand-drawn animation would have been a better solution. The Star Trek animated series that came out on the heels of the original series could do things with animation that they could never do in the 60s show,
right?
Because they didn't have the kind of technology that they needed to create worlds like that, to create aliens like that, so yeah.
That's why even the latest iteration of this generation's new Spider-Man, so Into the Spider-Verse with Miles Morales as Spider-Man.
I loved it.
When I got to tell you a story. This is hilarious. My wife and I decided we're going to see a summer movie, at the time, and we didn't have children at the moment, and we're like, yay, summer movie, we have nothing to do, we're just both teachers on summer break, let's enjoy it. And so we see that there's nothing playing at the theaters except the Spider-Man movie. And I'm gonna tell this complete story in full transparency. So I said, all right, we'll have a day drinking moment, and we're gonna have some cocktails and just kind of, if we're just gonna watch a Spider-Man movie, might as well, have a little floaty time while we're doing it. And so
you went to the Alamo Draft House or someplace like that where you can have drinks?
It was Evo, the spot that you can have drinks and lunch and everything. And so we're like, hey, we'll be responsible adults, but at the same time, if I'm gonna watch this kiddie movie, I might as well laugh a little bit more in it. And then we start, and 5 minutes in, I have my beverage, and I'm like, I put this down, and I never touch it. I said, I need to be fully aware of what is happening in this, because the animation is finally, almost, like I said, finally catching up to the comic of the comic world truly coming into form. And I think it completely juxtaposes everything that we've seen regarding live action Marvel adaptations. It just shot it all down to be like, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to come back to the comics. This is probably why even Marvel's What If got so many more waves, because you got back to animation, back to this this more expressive form in the storytelling of where the comics allowed you, it put in your mind in the first place for you to be able to connect dots and put your imagination at work.
The first Doctor Strange, all that 3D manipulation they did, basically computer animation, but it's still animation. None of that would have been possible, if you were going to do that, let's say, when they made Mary Poppins, you're going to have to do it the same way they had Dick Van Dyke dancing with the penguins in the park.
Right.
And it would have looked cool for the time.
But then you realize it would still just be a little flat.
Exactly. That's the biggest problem with frame-by-frame animation integrated with live action, until you get the kinds of digital technology to let you place things precisely. So you don't get, for instance, what you used to see with the little outline around people when they
Yes. And shout out to Mary Poppins. It's still a beautiful movie.
Oh.
And it still holds water. It still holds well. But then, like you said, you could not tell the same stories without certain animation technologies. No. So in my latest techie sort of bridge is there's now moving towards quantum computing, where let's just say it like this. I just upgraded my internet from what I have to fiber.
Okay.
And it's the idea of talking in light and no longer electricity, but really just light, because as you transmit from point to point through the fiber optics, there is no delay.
Which means that, for instance, the problem with Zoom meetings where musicians can't play together may be about to disappear.
It's about to disappear. They already have that technology going out, because if you have these fiber optic moments, they're like, is this a... I've seen another app that's actually out there to purposefully give these musicians, because even when I was in school 20 years ago, Jesus, I'm not even going to say that, but is the fact that we were already pioneering a technology to have recording sessions across the country with certain latency understandings. But now the latency is getting very, very, very small. That same technology is not just about the point-to-point communication, but it's also within the point-to-point communication within the processor. So no longer going to transistors, but quantum perspectives of computations. They had this one computer in China that completed a series of computations that would have taken traditional processors 2.5 billion years to do. But now they did it in a matter of seconds. And
I'm not surprised.
And I said that because, number one, maybe that'll help GTA 6 get out faster, but then it expands the ability to say and write or prompt a thing to happen within animation and imagination applications to then happen at command, almost like you're painting with your technology more quickly than you ever would have in ever before.
How do you think, now this is a big controversy right now, how do you think that's going to affect the traditional painter?
The traditional painter this is where I like it. I was just thinking about the creative arts and how we integrate with technology. One would say that the art is only as good as the paintbrush in the painter's hand. Not the paintbrush, but the paintbrush in the painter's hand.
True.
Now, with that, we've had a conversation about the breed of music that has come through digital production styles, of how musicians have adapted different instruments. They may not pick up the guitar, they may pick up more of the finger trigger production stations, MPCs or things like that, but they're still musicians. They're still thinkers and creators. So the paintbrush changed for them.
Right.
So as long as you're expecting them to paint with the same medium, that's almost a different conversation versus the quality of creative that then invents on a new instrument. That's like saying, well, you're not a lute player, you're an electric guitar player. That's totally different. Well, yes.
Yeah, and some people have fallen into that trap. Segovia was interested in working with Chet Atkins until he found out that Chet Atkins had played electric guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And then he rejected him as a student because, as far as he was concerned, that was not guitar.
Right.
Which is very strange to me. All right. But at the same time, it's another variation of what you're talking about. I remember, and this is when I realized some of what you were talking about years ago, Madonna came out with a cover of Don McLean's American Pie.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was they did this really rapid fire photo montage, all these faces. And I didn't like her cover of the song. I thought Don McLean's version of it was better. But I loved what they did with the video. And I realized, man, digital technology and the impact it's going to have on the visual world. You know, I could see right then that this is just getting started.
It's just getting started.
And so, yeah, where you know, when I saw the Sistine Chapel, you know, I'm looking at, okay, one man did all of this in a 4-year period, and it's, oh my God. You know? Now, will somebody in my lifetime or in the next 100 years do something just as amazing visually? I think so. It just won't be in the same
It won't be this
context. It won't be the same, you know.
And this well, I mean, that's where the argument lies, is that, are you going to paint another Sistine Chapel? No, because no one's building Sistine Chapels for you to paint on.
Right, exactly. It's the quandary that jazz music has found itself in for some time now, because when jazz music was drawing from popular songs by George Gershwin, and George Gershwin had a background as a classical pianist and as a jazz pianist, particularly as a stride pianist, he knew how to write things that were fun for a jazz pianist to play, which is why jazz musicians ended up liking playing his songs, and he loved the idea that they played his songs. Well, guys who are writing for Broadway now, they don't have any of that connection.
Right.
So if you're going to take something like the soundtrack of Cats and try to paint jazz over it, it doesn't really work very well. Because it's not designed for that kind of thing.
Which is, going back to our previous episode, is probably why the fusion and the creativity point of Lin-Manuel Miranda worked so much for, like, Hamilton, who was celebrating, like, their 10th year Broadway reunion at the Tonys. That was an incredible performance, and even his writing style, like, he's been cranking them out like the 90s of Tim Rice and Elton John on some of those Disney classics, is now Lin-Manuel Miranda, because he's also crossed different industrial giants between Disney and Universal and DreamWorks, where he's written Vivo, he's written for Coco. Not Coco.
Oh, he did some of the music for Coco?
No, he did. I'm sorry, Moana. The first Moana.
Yeah.
He did Moana with Disney. He did, and then the Hamilton plays. He also did Mufasa too. That Mufasa movie. He was the main engine for that, and so they're calling him because now he has a distinctive writing style that is. I always laugh with my wife. I said, I can tell when it's Lin-Manuel Miranda because you're going to have a vowel that has a like a sort of twang to it. Oh, like there's always.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what style is, you know.
And it appeals, and but it's also, he was in tune with the current, like I said, pop acceptance, rhythm and cadence that the people gravitate to, but then he's able to tie it into the musical genre and the essence of how they can perform it. And that's what's been very successful for him specifically. I've heard, that's what I said, even contrast between Moana and Moana 2. Moana 2 has different music writers, same vocal performers, not the same. Just not like, nope, that's not Lin-Manuel. I need him back on. It's like John Williams. Oh, like, for example, another part would be John Williams writes the first 2 or 3 movies of Harry Potter. So my wife is like, Harry Potter is so amazing. I'm like, it's not that great. It's really John Williams. And then at like 4th, 5, and 6, it's a different composer who was just simply imitating themes and variations from John Williams' original themes. And then I took that John Williams, Harry Potter's things. I'm like, just recognize how it's very similar to Hook, or it's very similar to Home Alone. It's still that Williams, you know, his orchestration, his use of percussive instruments, as well as a melody, his triangle use, the fact that he uses an orchestral triangle the way nobody else does. Like, yeah. I'm rambling, but yeah.
No. Williams deserves his reputation. He's you know, remarkable, and like all smart people, he steals from the people who came before him, and he does it in a very clever way. I mean, Richard Wagner is his man, especially for the Star Wars stuff. You know?
Yeah, that use of the Wagner's use of brass, for example, like it became the way Williams uses a French horn as a melodic storytelling instrument. It created reasons for people to want to pick up the French horn.
Yeah, we're definitely imitative in that sense, and imitation in popular culture pays a whole lot better than innovation. Innovation's dangerous.
That's why I think we went back to a conversation of why some comedians are only good for imitation and not their original work. You know, we talked about like Eddie Murphy at one point. Not saying he's not good for original work, but he was very much had this springboard of, because you can do Richard Pryor, because you can do Mr. T, or you can do James Brown, people wanted to hear Eddie Murphy do those impressions, or or do Stevie Wonder.
Well, because there's something absolutely remarkable when someone can do an impression, especially if it's good.
Right.
if it's a bad impression, it's just kind of
So like
kitchen talk or something.
So, for example, Saturday Night Live, this is a character named Jay Farrow. He gets a lot of praise for doing a lot of impressions, but his original skits have not taken as much acclaim as his impressions would be. Exactly. So
there's a guy on YouTube who's become something of a YouTube sensation who's called Uncle Roger, and it's a guy he's an Asian comedian. I don't want to say that he's Korean because I'm not sure if he's South Korean or if he's Chinese, but I'm wanting to say South Korean, and I apologize, Uncle Roger, if you're not. But that's not who he is. He just made up this character that's like everybody's obnoxious uncle know-it-all. Mm-hmm. And he started off...
Is this the emotional?
I think so. The one he basically started off by watching this woman from the BBC cooking rice.
Yes.
And he says, "No, you use rice pot. No measure water, use finger." It was just,
and he plays into it.
So you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
Uncle Roger. He's hilarious.
Because everybody needs that relatable source of imitation. It's because that's probably why, like, it's adaptable. Or, for example, even Tyler Perry's Medea character is that a lot of people could relate to a essentially crazy grandmother matriarch that needs to take her medicine and is a bit unhinged, but has good intentions all the same. Like, when it comes down to it, she will defend her family, but also will defend her peace first.
Well, the thing with the Uncle Rogers, he was a stand-up comedian. He's still a stand-up comedian, but the Uncle Roger stuff is much more popular than his regular stand-up comedy. And
Right.
He speaks perfect English.
Right.
So it's the same kind of thing.
Pat Moriyama, I believe that's his name. The actor that plays Mr. Miyagi.
Oh, Pat Morita. Pat
Morita. Thank you. I'm like, I knew I was messing it up. Pat Morita. I'm finally coming across some great clips of him as a comedian who can kill a Red Fox impression. Like, he embodied Red Fox as an impression. I'm like, wow. But then the fact that how he came up with a voice for Mr. Miyagi, nobody highlighted who he was as an actor or as a comedian. He just was Mr. Miyagi. Like, after that, everything else was a Mr. Miyagi documentary of who is Pat? We don't care. Who is Mr. Miyagi? Like,
They even did one where they talked about the guy that they based Mr. Miyagi on, a martial artist who was Pat Morita's coach for the movie, and they became very, very good friends. You know, and this guy was like a champion martial artist, one of the best ever. Rarely ever defeated, for instance. And he died before Pat Morita did, and Pat Morita was really torn up about it. But it was not really as much about Pat Morita, like you say. It's about this character, because there's something about that first Karate Kid hit something that anybody who's a teacher and anybody who's ever tried to master a skill, whatever the skill is, can relate to that movie. You know, it has a depth to it, even though it is a formula film. Mm-hmm. It still has a depth to it that.
It's like one of the 7 stories my dad talks about. Man comes in on, stranger comes in, stranger leaves town. Like there's a whole the formulas of the. I need to look that up.
There's the Western or the action adventure.
Yeah. Men
with guns going somewhere, or women. Men or women with the guns going somewhere to do something dangerous.
Right.
Right. Basically, the formula Western where the stranger comes into town, but it's also the formula sci-fi or 30s film noir. You know, the stranger comes into town, sees that there's something wrong, bangs some heads together, and then leaves. And the town is maybe with the girl, maybe not. Sometimes maybe my dad used to joke that they kiss their horses and shake hands with the women and ride out of town.
I still maintain. I think I kind of jump on the wagon where I don't know if we talked about this before, but I love that theory where the Karate Kid is the villain. and destroys Johnny's life. Like, he comes in and he's not the hero, he's the villain. Like, Johnny was the victim. Johnny had a severely abusive teacher. And then he had his goals set in life. Like, he says, it's my senior year, I'm gonna make it work. You know, he's talking about very positive things.
That's very interesting. Yeah,
he had anger issues due to the fact that his parents were in a rough spot. His teacher was abusing him. He couldn't quite express himself appropriately to his girlfriend.
He was looking at a scholarship to a major university with martial arts skill.
Yep.
And when he lost that match to an unknown, they withdrew the scholarship offer, and he wound up as a homeless person.
Yep. And then there you get to the premise of Cobra Kai. And I'm like, you know what? If it weren't for Daniel,
that would work.
If it weren't for Daniel, he probably would have been all right, you know. Yeah. So, but that's the way I like it, you know.
That's fascinating. You know, well, I mean, okay, some filmmakers. What's that movie? Desperado. Did you ever see that one?
Yeah,
with very alternate kind of a
with
movie.
Antonio Banderas.
Yeah. It was interesting. I mean. You know, sometimes filmmakers do make these movies that are like don't follow the trajectory that we're used to.
Right.
But once again, innovation, genuine creation of something that dangerous territory.
Right. And
Fellini is the most daring filmmaker I've ever seen in that respect. Who does it without gore? He does it without, you know, it's not. You know, he makes R-rated films sometimes, but it's never shock value or any of that kind of thing. It's just very psychological, very odd, and for many American audiences, it moves too slow. Right? What he does, my wife said it perfectly. We were watching 8½, which is one of his masterpieces, one of the best foreign film, and we're watching it, and she goes, you know, the point of this film. Stop. And she made me back it up. And she goes, there's a woman here walking behind the scene here with a black dress and a polka dotted umbrella. And when you see that, that's the point of this movie.
Wow.
No, if you watch 8½, that's one of the best ones, or Amarcord. Every scene looks like a painting. The guy has the best eye of any director I've ever seen. And you know, I see his influence definitely on later filmmakers. Well, the term Fellini-esque has entered the discussion. People describe Fellini-esque as something that's like much bigger than life, maybe even somewhat grotesque, etc. Anyway, yeah, I'm a big fan. I became a fan because the first movie I ever saw was Amarcord, which is about his childhood in Italy, living under Mussolini. And it's like no other movie I've ever seen in my life, you know. And he has his hardcore fans like me, and for every one of me, you can find a dozen people who can't stand him.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, when I used to go see Fellini at the film club at the University of Oklahoma when I was an undergraduate there, and even after that, when they can, and I said, man, you guys going to do any more Fellini? He says, wow. He says, most of us can't stand him. So, you know, they did all these other foreign directors. They loved Bergman and they loved Kurosawa. They weren't too crazy about Fellini. And, okay, La Dolce Vita is one of the most lauded films that he ever made, and it's very dark, and I don't really care for it. I like it until it gets to the ending. I think the ending is just yuck.
There are some movies I get to the point I'm like, okay, that's the end. We're gonna stop here.
Exactly. I know where you're going, and well, okay, another movie, really bold, unusual film that I could have done without the ending. It's called The Ruling Class.
Okay.
With Peter O'Toole.
Okay.
It's one of Peter O'Toole's best pieces of work. He plays the, the 12th, the 13th, the whatever, Earl of Gurney. This Englishman who's off his rocker. But he becomes the Earl of Gurney through a bunch of strange mishaps. And the problem with this man is he's now in a position of power in English society. But he thinks he's Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
He has long blonde hair. He looks just like a Renaissance painting of Jesus, and he sleeps on a cross at night.
Oh no!
It's weird. It's not really irreverent because he's a lunatic.
Right.
He's just the average village idiot who thinks he's God. Right. I didn't find it blasphemous at all. But they have to cure him because it just won't do for this man in a white suit running around, behaving like a, there's one absolutely hilarious scene where these two ladies from the garden club or whatever are wanting to get donations for something. And the scene ends with him chasing them with a bunch of flowers in his hand going, I am the resurrection and the life. And it's wild. I mean, it really is. But then the movie, it's profound too, because it takes this left turn or right turn, whatever you want to call it. It's totally unexpected. They need to cure him, and they cure him. And then he stops being Jesus Christ, and he's behaving like the most perfectly socially acceptable Victorian gentleman. And it's not the Victorian era, right? And it's, contemporary. It's like 60s, 70s, right? Society. But he's walking around with a bowler hat on and dressed like a Victorian gentleman and being very, 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 very prim and proper. Jack the Ripper was active during the Victorian era.
Yeah, that part.
And that's where the movie is, I think, brilliant, because it's asking you, do we like Jesus more or do we like Jack the Ripper more?
Oh, there you go.
That's where the movie gets incredibly profound. And I was just like, whoa. And, like I said, it's disturbing ending. Disturbing ending. But, man, I mean, up to the last little bit, I was just like, this is just one of the more brilliant meditations on, we say we want lightness, and we say we want justice, and we say we want all these things, and yet here's this man who's totally harmless, except he's just very eccentric. But we've got to knock that eccentricity out of him, and now he becomes Jack the Ripper, but all of a sudden, he's very acceptable.
Acceptable. Ooh,
yeah, it's a dark film.
I mean, in a different light, I have two different thoughts that accompany it, because then there was a Eddie Murphy film called Holy Man, where he's not professing any faith, but just sort of walks the earth, as he puts it, not wanting what the world says he should want.
Ooh.
And he finds himself helping. He likes to help people. And he finds himself helping a friend who works at a home shopping network television show. So then when he's talking to her on screen, he just says, she's presenting him a Tupperware. He's like, don't buy that. You don't need this. And then it's like the reverse psychology is because they don't need it, it sells out. But he's really just trying to tell everybody, what's the point of this? You only have 70 years of life. Why would you waste it on these items? I don't care about this zero-turn motor.
There's so many cool movies that exploit that trope. Have you seen Being There? Peter Sellers?
Yes.
Yeah. This guy is basically not all there mentally, and he's been raised in front of television. All he knows is television, doesn't read or write.
Right.
And yet when he hits the airwaves, he's perfect for television. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, everybody's galvanized by him. And he really doesn't know anything but just how to take care of plants and how to be on television.
Exactly.
And it's, that movie's got a lot to say.
Well, it's turned into how some people live now in this influencer age, where they don't know how to not be an influencer.
Right.
I've seen people just sit down and just take pictures of their food as if that was prayer.
C.S. Lewis has a great thing in the Screwtape Letters where he talks about where Screwtape is telling his nephew, who's the tempter he's in training, that he once had a person convinced that they were praying when all they were really doing was looking at a spot on the wall. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the other part from a previous part of the conversation was another person that I guess gets swept up because of the Imitation was I think we may have spoken it before, I'm not sure, the actor that plays Jesus in the Chosen series. And I feel bad. I think his name is Jonathan.
Jonathan Rumi, I want to say.
Yes, or something close
Something
to that.
very similar.
And how many people just mistake him, not even mistake him, they
think he's Jesus.
yeah, you're Jesus, straight up.
Have you seen that documentary, Jesus and Me, about him?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, he talks about it all the time, about the fact that people ask him to pray for him, and you know, so
Like, I will pray with you with the same faith you have, because
Right.
I went to the same church you do, but
Yeah.
dude, I'm not the dude.
Right, exactly.
But they can't separate, you know, reality and essentially, technically fantasy because of the portrayal.
Yeah.
And it's so he's more valued. Here's the tough part is, let's just kind of move this as a pivot, is the toughest part about being creative, let's say arts, musicians, theater, is that many people seem to think and find and respond or react to their value is assigned by their art
Oh, yes.
than their personality or their personhood.
Well, we've talked about, okay, the French during the 1800s, if they saw a painting they didn't like, and this is why Impressionism was so incendiary, they would say the country is in danger. They saw visual art as an expression of not just the individual painter's ideas, but of the society's ideas. And if you reinforce the society's ideas, then boy, you were going to do really well, right? And you were going to make lots of money. And all the way up through the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, you had painters like Bouguereau is one of them, who very acceptable, made great money, very good painters. But then you had other ones like Manet, who was willing to say, well, you know, okay, I'm not going to call this a Venus. I'm just going to paint a naked woman because you want to see naked women, but you want me to call it a Venus because that's the little hint, you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge game you play about this. And so he did otherwise, and yeah, people went nuts.
Yeah.
There were other ones. Courbet painted a woman that so enraged the king of France that he struck it with his riding crop.
Wow.
And Courbet said, if I'd known, I would have painted it on thinner canvas. Because if he'd split it, of course, then the king would have had to pay for it.
Right.
But no, that art is dangerous. All art is dangerous. You know, because, okay, I remember years ago hearing that somebody wanted to do something about Sesame Street because they felt it was changing people's behavior.
I remember even the fight for Mr. Rogers to be on television.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then there was a big deal about the Snuffleupagus and Big Bird because, you know, at one point they finally said, okay, well, somebody else has to see the Snuffleupagus because the kids are getting upset because Big Bird, nobody believes Big Bird. And then the kids loved Big Bird. Well, I mean, but that is always there in some form or another for everyone at every level, right? I mean, great, for instance. We were talking about Charlie Parker. Now, I think after Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker is it. I mean, I love Duke, I love Basie, I love all the Monk, but Miles Davis once said, the history of jazz can be told in 4 words. Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker. And he's pretty much correct. And Miles knows a lot more about jazz than I do. And he was there for John Coltrane.
Right.
So if Miles Davis says that's it, I'm going to go with Miles. And the longer I live with jazz, the more I agree that is it. Now, we were talking about Charlie Parker, and this friend of mine, a very smart fellow, said that he's always struggled to appreciate it. And I said, well, listen to this. And so I played Charlie Parker's version of Summertime with strings. So it's set in a very conventional, acceptable framework.
Right.
And Bird is magnificent on this cut. I mean, the first 6 recordings, if somebody thinks they don't like Charlie Parker, they need to hear those 6 recordings, the first 6 Bird with strings recordings, because he's in magnificent form on those. That's where the Just Friends solo comes that people talk about all the time. Branford Marsalis can play the thing perfectly. So I played this, and my friend listened to it and said, I said, what do you think of that? He said, it's great. I said, okay. So he changed his mind. His wife, who loves opera, wanted to hear a traditional operatic version of Summertime after that. Now, it's not but that she acknowledged it was great, but she immediately wanted to hear another version of Summertime. So whether she admitted it or not, there was something in that version that was banging up against some walls in her mind.
Right. I need this to resolve. Almost like this idea of it's not complete, it's not full, it's not ready. It's tantalizing, but it's not total.
Yeah, and it's like I remember once playing. There's a great version of Porgy and Bess by Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald. It's wonderful. But I remember playing. You remember Naaman Thomas?
Not off the top of my head. No.
Okay, he may have been gone by the time you were there. But anyway, he was an opera singer, opera teacher at Texas State, and he was African American. And I played him Louis Armstrong's version of Bess, You Is My Woman Now, which is, Louis Armstrong hits a home run with that. But if you have the operatic version in your mind, it's just not going to register. And he kind of laughed at it at first and then listened to it and said, yeah, okay. He had to reset his expectations in confronting this because he's musically powerful, but not according to Hoyle. Yeah.
One of my thoughts with that is I remember the time I had to unravel my mind with Nessun Dorma. And I have 4 versions that sit with me. Pavarazzi, Andrea Bocelli,
who's a Pavarotti protege.
Yes. And then number 3 hits me hard with Aretha Franklin.
That didn't just hit you hard. That made the papers.
Yes.
I mean, people who don't even never write about it. I mean, there were articles, you know, where people were going like, wow, what's going on here? They said, you know, this woman is a old school diva, you know. That you know.
When I hear that, and it's like you get this, because I can operatically argue with Pavarotti and Bocelli on their take with that, but it's almost like I put that literally in a different category with Aretha Franklin.
Well, does she sing the melody as written, or does she take liberties with it? I haven't heard it in a long time.
She has some melismas that approach it, but she still sings the melody as written.
Okay.
But her rhythmic approach to it is completely relaxed.
There you go.
You almost find like it's like it catches up and then lets go. It catches up and then lets go. And so your captivation has to relax with it.
Okay.
Because
go on, finish.
With Pavarotti, you're like, da, 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 da. Like you're like, yeah, you're on the edge of your seat to expect what's going to happen next. With Aretha, you're like, wait a minute, I can't get ahead of her. I have to sit back and let her resolve what the music already did. And
singing like Billie Holiday.
Yes, and you have to almost just literally sit in a different part of your chair. And some people, you know, I can see the civil war that people would have when it comes to, you can't do that because that's not what the music was.
That was not the composer's intent. That's one of the things you'll hear a lot.
And that's where it gets to the blessing part of the paint colors is not, the recommended paint colors is still at the mercy of the artist's paintbrush.
Yeah, that's true. You said there were 4 versions of Nessun.
I meant to say 3 because I think I sat with Bocelli, Pavarazzi, and
there are 4 things I want to talk about. I can't remember the 4th one.
It's my turn to get old now because I really think it was just 3 because I thought I had another person.
I promise you after this show though, I'm probably going to go.
My honorable mention would say Paul Potts from American Got Talent because it was horrible and beautiful. It was broken and beautiful. It's like you can see his not respectfully, but you can tell he hasn't even invested into his dental quality yet while he's performing. But all he has is the fact that he was a postal worker who loves to sing, who's never had any training, but finds a way to muster up his strength and his instrument of his voice to create a sound in a theater that brought it down to tears. And
so it was a competent version of it.
It was a competent, like I'm saying, like if you're going to compare it to Pavarotti, then no. But then for the beautiful brokenness that it was to say a random person from a random village in a town can then project and paint in his own way. That's what I'm saying. That would be my number 4.
That's another story that comes up all the time. I mean, Grandma Moses, she's not my favorite painter, but, she got a lot of people's attention for that very reason, because she had something to say that nobody else was exactly saying. I'm definitely going to go check out Pavarotti and Bocelli and
Franklin.
Aretha Franklin, and what was the other one?
Paul Potts. I'm gonna send you all 4.
Potts.
Yeah, hopefully not the original one.
Well, but I remember what I was going to say. William F. Buckley, political commentator, etc. I just watched an American Masters documentary about him, and it knocked some of the shine off of him because I found out some of the stuff he said when he was younger I wasn't so crazy about. I liked Firing Line. I thought Firing Line was a brilliant show.
Right.
And that's why I liked him. But then I noticed some of the stuff he did earlier. I was just like, I can't really relate to. You may have good reasons for thinking this way, but I can't go with you on that. Anyway, he was an avid fan of the piano, of keyboards in general, particularly harpsichord, and Johann Sebastian Bach. Mm-hmm. He thought Bach hung the moon. And if often asked to comment on the greatest piece of music ever, he would say the B minor Mass, which is a safe, conservative, quote, quote, ha, ha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, answer, but nonetheless a very good one. Mm-hmm. B minor Mass may be the finest piece of musical literature ever created. I certainly would be with him on that, so that's a place where we would agree. He performed a Bach concerto on harpsichord with a symphony in Arizona.
Okay.
And it was telecast on Firing Line. And Barry Goldwater was there and thought it was great because it was his friend playing. It wasn't because Barry Goldwater's a big fan of Bach's music or anything like that. And Buckley got through it. Mm-hmm. He stumbled around a lot. He's an amateur. He didn't play it that well, but what was so wonderful about it was how much he was enjoying himself and how much he loved the opportunity to get to do this, and the fact that all these people who watched Firing Line watched a Bach concerto that they would otherwise probably never have experienced.
Right. And is that not...
And the symphony killed it.
So this brings it to a point, to a head, is that the whole point in for many is like that. Maybe the argument for some is I even deal with this theologically, because you can only interpret as it's been interpreted from the interpreters. Let me just...
Well, no. There's a passage there's a couple of passages in different parts of the Bible where it says where the writer says, I was about to write this down, and God told me don't write it down.
Right. That's one thing. That's the author. But I'm saying even from the commentators and accepted, like let's just say like accepted trains of study from the person that studied it first, not from the author, from the one that interpreted or exegeted the thought. So I use that to turn it back into, with art, some people only subscribe to certain versions of, after the transcription, this is how you interpret the music. How long a cadenza may be, or how long you take your how long you interpret adagio, how you interpret allegro. It's still not exactly quarter note equals all the time, and there will be schools of thought and great debate. But the other side of it is always, and I say this as a teacher of young students, to always remind yourself, to the people who hear it for the first time, what did that sound like? I mean, you want to know my first time I ever heard God Bless a Child? It was the Blood, Sweat, and Tears version.
Which is very nice.
Very nice. And or even for my dad remixed a lot of stuff for me. The first time I hear Love and Happiness, as written from like even or performed from Reverend Al Green. I heard Graham Central Station, Larry Graham's version of it. So much more funky in my opinion.
I'll bet.
And
well, he got a better bass player. he's got one of the bass players.
And things like that on how I've approached music, it always reminds me of like the fact of music or art or expression is not so much of the continuation of the original work per se. It is for the consummation of the new listener to appreciate its experience and then explore the original work or to elaborate it on another day itself, which is kind of similar to my thought that we've had before in season 1 about my liberties I take on with art expression. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting to read the reactions to Glenn Gould when he was alive. Because Glenn Gould, in most cases, wasn't playing anything that wasn't on the page.
Right.
Where he took liberties was with rhythm. And when you were talking about Aretha Franklin's rhythm on Nessun Dorma, the thing that came to my mind is something that I saw in a book on an arrangement, and I can't remember his name now, I'm sorry to say, but he said rhythm is the emotive element in music. Mm-hmm. And it's so true. And so what is it about Glenn Gould? Glenn Gould has a swagger in his rhythm that I think he gets from the fact that he grew up in the big band era. He loved Petula Clark. He liked pop music. He listened intently to the conversations of people. He even wrote a fugue based on spoken word conversations.
I mean,
so, you know,
there's a complete world, and it goes even back to season 1, of how the emotive cadence of speech, it's what drives any point. Mm-hmm. And it's not even about, you know, it's kind of like we said, it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. You can have literally the same words, but said it in a different pace.
I just had a horrible thought. I don't know if you have a Kindle or not, but have you ever done the text-to-speech?
Oh, yeah, that's horrible.
I was just sitting there thinking about what it would sound like to hear one of Martin Luther King's speeches read by the text-to-speech thing.
Well, I mean, you can honestly do that. Like, I've done that even just rhythmically. That's how I practice sometimes. Learning how to do and present certain information sometimes, it's not about what I say, it's the fact of who I'm saying it to and when I'm saying it. It's, you know, if I have a dream, I have a dream. Mm. Same words.
Yeah.
Different
I have a dream.
That my 4 little children.
Yeah.
But I had a dream that my 4 little children, that's different. I have a dream that my 4 little children. And it, like, even just approaching it rhythmically can create different atmospheres.
Yeah.
That even, like you said, like Glenn Gould, knowing from the big band era, I'm literally just thinking about even Data Little Lidl, is how we remember the linguistics of art. The linguistics of it, the language of art, the language of approaching melodic interpretations.
See, this is one of the things, when I was learning how to play, that was where I kind of put myself in a corner and I painted myself in that corner on purpose. Mm-hmm. Why? I come from rural Oklahoma. Fell in love with Thelonious Monk, Bud Powell, Oscar Peterson, Bill Evans, even Dave Brubeck, you know, a lot of cool piano players, right? As well as Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker. Even if they were from the country, they don't sound like their country, right? So, I mean, one of the things that I absolutely wanted to do, the da-da-dee-da-da-da-da was part of that, was I wanted people to know who you're listening to a show-enough jazz musician. I don't want to sound like somebody who can play jazz. I want to sound like somebody who is jazz. Right? Well, the problem with that is, of course, when I'm doing this, the market wants... I'll never forget one guy came up to me, trumpet player, and asked me, we were sitting down for dinner for the first time, said, "Do you play it all from Bach to rock?" And I was like, "Well, no, I don't." You know, and to him that was kind of a trip because talking about different perspectives. He's African American, so he doesn't have to think about what jazz articulation sounds like. He doesn't have to think about. I mean, I noticed this with some of my African American students. If they had a church background, they could figure out what the articulations were real quick. I didn't have to worry about that, right? But me, coming from a different perspective altogether, figuring out the articulations, and articulation is tied intrinsically to rhythm.
Yeah. I mean, you shared, and I'm actually might do this in another episode. We might get to the organ at some point, or the keyboards. You shared a video with me of a church musician who was accompanying on the organ, and it was a hymn essentially that they were singing, if I remember right. But his approaches, especially when we pad on the organ, the techniques of connecting notes that are technically unconnected. They're not tonally connected, but we literally like smooth it out from transition to transition is a rhythmic perspective. I'm teaching one of my musicians here at the church on how to do that. It's like you cannot play it as a percussive instrument. You play it almost like a carpet. You just smooth out it over into your next change. And so you overlay your perspective rhythmically, even approaching it, because you almost have to set yourself up to land in a certain space. You can't just go to the next, or else you just sound completely disconnected and you sound like you don't know what you're doing. That is a rhythmic linguistic perspective on even how, if I know how to speak French, similarly, there is a certain flowing of phrasing that is accompanied with the rhythm of the language that flows from a native speaker as opposed to a non-native speaker. Because if English being a Germanic language, which much more staccato and space in between, versus a melodic Romance language such as Italian and French, Spanish as well, or more even Portuguese.
Portuguese always sounds like half Spanish and half French to me.
It really is. Portuguese is definitely that melting pot between all three.
Yeah.
And then with the way the Brazilians take that Portuguese and reintegrate it with a music intonation, oh my gosh, it is.
Well, that's what happens when you bring Africans in. The samba and all of those, the samba, the bossa nova, those are the two most famous Brazilian grooves, but there's tons of others, But yeah,
so it goes back to that place of what you were saying, is that if you cannot have a conversation before the art, if you cannot have a conversation and sit down before the instruction or the change of information, then you don't know how to approach the instruction. You don't know how to approach the information. You don't know how to approach the art. That's probably why it's so important that when I would meet a new band, half the time, it'd all be about, like, let's go hang out first before we ever play a note.
Back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, before we even had to start having the conversation about how in African culture, before they'll do business with you, right? The friend of mine was over there for many years, and he said before they would even before they're going to sign anything or enter into any negotiations, they're going to have a meal. And the meal is going to last a long time.
Yeah.
And, we're going to hang out for a while. We're going to get to know each other. Right. Yeah.
And I do that. I really do. People ask me, even in leadership styles, like, well, how did you succeed in this and that in leadership? We ate. What would you talk about? We ate.
Mm-hmm.
And
food is a conversation.
Food is a ministry. I mean, like if I look at even the life of Jesus Christ, I always say, like, not only did he hung out with sinners, no, he ate with them.
Mm-hmm.
He shared meals with them.
Which was another level of communion, because
yes,
when he said the priest avoided the Samaritan,
exactly,
he was making a point.
Exactly.
Yeah, the priest avoided the man who was beaten on the highway. The Samaritan helped him. The man on the highway was not a Samaritan.
Yes.
The implication is that the man on the highway was a member of the tribe, and the priest should have helped him.
Right.
But he wouldn't touch him because he thought it was a dead body. So the law got in the way of the spirit.
Got in the way of ministry and spirit, and that's the whole point. Is like you need to have some sort of, frankly, spiritual connection before you can create a spiritual consumption. Like there's something that has to be organically constructed by deconstructing everything else. Like you deconstruct tradition, you deconstruct expectation, you deconstruct what you even came with, and learn to bond through the meal, through the basic human need for sustenance, and how that affects even your there's always a great time of you hang and, man, try this food, talking about food, and
well, sure,
and how it satisfies, and how it was what you needed, and maybe you haven't tried this food before. Oh man, now I'm ready to play, now I'm ready to talk, now I'm ready to open up.
Mm-hmm. Oh sure, that's that's one of the things that is wrong with the audition process in many cases. However, part of the reason it's as rigorous as it is you need to know that the person you're auditioning, if it's, let's say it's professional theater, you need to know the person you're auditioning is going to be capable even when they have a severe stomach ache, even when they, even when somebody's heckling them, you need to know that they're pretty much made of stone, right? So that's part of why it has that rigor built into it. But at the same time, we miss a lot of talent that way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great talent out there that we're not using that could possibly be used if we, brought them along a little differently.
And that has been changing, like I said, my leadership and lifestyle of experiencing people and experiencing decisions I make with people is often based off of a meal.
There's a great film called 10 Questions for the Dalai Lama. And this guy got a job making a travelogue film about India. And while he was there, he said, okay, I'll do it, and I'll do it for a reduced rate if I can get an audience with the Dalai Lama. And so they said, okay, yeah, you can talk to him for X amount of time. I think it was like 30 minutes to an hour or something like that. And they said, and you can ask him 10 questions. But make sure they're good questions, because he does not suffer fools gladly, basically. If he thinks you're being silly, if he thinks they're not good questions, if he doesn't enjoy what's going on, he'll just get up and leave. He won't even say goodbye, he'll just get up and leave. Right? So this guy spent this whole film trying to come up with questions, right, in this whole experience. And then the questions are great. And one of the points he talks to him about, well, what should we do about, this is really timely, Israel and the Middle East. Israel and Palestine, the whole conflict in the Middle East. And he says, we need to have a picnic. I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
If you could ever get them to sit down and have a picnic, yeah, you might be able to do something.
And that's always is. If I had any advice, no matter what, I always tell anybody, before you do anything, eat. Before you do anything, get to a basic place of foundational understanding of we all need to eat. We all need sustenance. We all need food.
I remember once I got in a really weird mood and I typed a bunch of stuff, and there was, basically railing about this, that, and the other. And my wife looked at it and says, you sound like a 2-year-old that needs a nap.
I told him, I said it in church the other day. My best marriage advice, eat. Like, sometimes me and my wife, we have spats that we were really just hungry about.
Hangry is a real thing.
Hangry is an absolutely real thing. And so I need to conclude with that is like, maybe we all should find something to eat. Find a good brunch or lunch buddy. Don't do life alone. Find something to share a meal with, because there are cultures and understandings and foundations that is built on. If you can just simply share a meal and learn to feed each other in ways that you learn how to appreciate, this blesses them too. This is also a way to support each other. And it goes further than just a bowl of rice eventually, and can grow into recognizing their humanity, recognizing their their needs for life and their needs and their desires are just as valuable as yours. And so we can grow in many ways. So find someone to go take the lunch that you may know. Find someone to take the lunch that you don't know or you haven't connected with in a long time. That'd be a challenge for you until the next time we see each other.
That was beautiful. Well said.
I appreciate you.
You're listening to a Frozen Truth production.